Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to skip politics this week and talk about what is Voce and why does it matter. But first, education support professionals. How about support professionals in general? Let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, as always, thanks for joining us. Well, I'll tell you something. We're going to take up a number of topics that are very important. They don't get a lot of news, but they're extremely important in the functioning of our society. We're going to talk about support professionals. They provide many of the aspects of work that often go unreported, unmentioned, but they make our society function. And in particular, we're going to talk about education support professionals. And joining us is Angela Vigna. She's the Pennsylvania State Education Association's Education Support Professional of the Year. Good, whatever it is, good day.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Well, look, let me start with I want you to talk about what you do in the schools, but overall, you are in a occupation that doesn't get a lot of news, but yet it's essential to the functioning of our economy in so many different occupations and so many professions.
We are. We're kind of the person that is not in the limelight. We work very hard every day to be sure that the students can achieve the goals that they need to be successful. This could be anybody from your cafeteria workers to your bus drivers. I personally am a personal care aide for the first 15 years of my career, and I'm now a paraprofessional that pushes into the classrooms. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is to be sure that the kids are getting all the support they need here to be educationally sound.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it, what you do reinforces the learning aspects for each student that is actively engaged in learning and obviously connected to the schools.
Correct. Many of us push into classrooms with the teachers, hearing the instruction that's given. And then when the students have a study hall or an independent time, we work closely with them to reinforce what had been taught.
Yeah. I'll tell you, you had to be hugely surprised when the announcement came that you were selected as Education Support Professional of the Year, right?
I am. I was taken by surprise. Leechburg School District, where I work, is a very small school. So they were able to keep it a secret that they had nominated me. And when they told me that I had won this award, it kind of took my breath away. To come to work, do your job of what you're required to do, and to be recognized for what you do. I'm very honored and very humbled to be receiving this award.
All right. Yeah. Let's run to a break. When we come back, I want you to talk a little bit about, as a classroom aide, how specifically do you help with students? I think it's important for our viewers to get a general sense about what role you actually play. What is it that you actually do that is really important for the learning of our students in the classrooms? We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, we're talking about education support profession and the profession in general, and in particular with Angela Vigna. She's PSEA's Education Support Professional of the Year. Well, let's for the folks and for me, and let's talk a little bit about what you actually do as a classroom aide.
So my typical day begins with me being at bag check. We must check backpacks now. So I am one of the first contacts that they see in the mornings. So, you know, we try to provide those children with a good morning, hope you have a great day. And then my day kind of proceeds into attending some math classes, some English classes. Then there will be independent study halls where the students will come to me for some refresher on what the teacher may have taught, you know, the prior periods. Some examples of some things that I have done to help the kids to be able to do those things. I currently work with a student who is unable to read, but he has the ability to learn if he hears the content. So I will set time aside that if they're reading a novel in English class, read that novel to him so that he is able to retain the content and still test in that subject and stay mainstreamed.
Yeah, I mean, you just gave a couple of examples of really how important it is in terms of what you do to assist students in education. And without it, the learning aspects would be behind, you know, would not be sufficient. I want to look. We obviously have had the pandemic. How has that affected your work?
Thank goodness we're back in person. It was rough while we were off to be able to work with the students through Google Meets. You really need to be able to have your students there with you to give them the support they need. While we made it work, it was not the best situation, but I'm glad we're back in person, you know, back in with the kids, and to have them back in the building, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Is there anything coming up? I mean, the school year has just started. We got a long way to go until next spring. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to?
No, I just get great accomplishment in seeing my students advance and progressing. That is a blessing to me. That's just what you hope for. I guess you could say the ESPs are the unsung heroes who are the behind the scene, making sure that these kids get their homework done and move on to what they need.
Do you chat with parents? I know, you know, parents come in to meet with teachers and with other school personnel. Do you meet with teachers and talk with them about their children?
I do. We have a great team system here. If I have a concern that a child has not grasped a topic, I'm able to go to the teacher and say, you know, I'm concerned about so-and-so. We need to enrich this a little bit more. I have the authority to email parents and kind of give them a heads up that, you know, little Johnny may need some help with some homework this evening, so it is great to work as a team.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. All right, we're going to run to a break, and we come back. Listen to this. What is Voce? I learned myself just in the last couple of days, and hopefully we'll all learn together.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back. Well, what is Voce and why does it matter? Joining me to chat about that is Maryann McEvoy. She is the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Advocacy and Reform, and Jessica Castle. She's the Program Director for Voce. All right, Jessica, I want to start with you. What is Voce?
Well, Voce means voice in Italian, and as an Italian, you can appreciate that.
I can.
And we are a human services organization specializing in adoption and permanency. So we work with moving foster care children and youth into forever homes. And so with that comes a great deal of knowledge and expertise in trauma. And one of the initiatives we started was the Forum on Pennsylvania's Children to bring folks together to connect and collaborate around the issue of trauma that's so widespread that our children and families across Pennsylvania are experiencing. And we had the honor of having Maryann as our honorary chairperson and keynote speaker last week at the forum.
So what's your governor's office do?
So we were actually formed out of executive order back in 2019. It was an order to protect vulnerable Pennsylvanians, and it created our office. It also created the child advocate position, which I hold as a dual role within that office, and is how Jessica and I became so closely connected. So our office was tasked, like I said, with protecting vulnerable populations, which is a very big ask. And when we came to the table to figure out how to do that, we said we need to do some root cause analysis here. How do we even begin to understand what makes people vulnerable, right? And it all came down to trauma, chronic stress, and adverse childhood experiences. That's where the science really led us.
Yeah, I want to get back to you, Jessica, in a moment, but let me stay with Maryann. I'll tell you, every day in the newspaper, on TV, and on radio, you read or hear or see something about some childhood trauma. It's almost like it's omnipresent. It's here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And it's actually been identified as the #1 public health crisis, not just for Pennsylvania,
right,
for our nation. And it's not discussed openly, right? You see things like the Surgeon General's report on smoking, how much attention that report got. That's actually outlined in a book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk that you might be familiar with. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It received so much attention. But then we look at the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which showed us the direct correlation between childhood abuse, neglect, and just chronic stress overall, and the public health implications that go with that. And we just haven't seen as widespread of a messaging campaign about this. So I'm glad that it's coming to light, but there's so much more to learn.
Anything you want to add to that? I mean, that was a pretty good answer.
Yeah, and well, to Maryann's point, it's so prevalent. And all the systems that our children and families navigate while looking for services and supports, they need to have the even playing field of knowledge and understanding of trauma. And so that was one of the reasons why we created our Forum on Pennsylvania's Children, to bring those different disciplines together to talk about how we can better serve the children and families that we're charged with serving.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the programs and services that you provide.
Sure. So we're specializing in adoption and permanency, and Voce is a trainer, right? So we have a number of trainings, a training in adoption competency and practice self-regulation, and our forum is something that we're going to have annually that we hope to continue to reach out to our audience and with education and invite them back next year to really begin to start these partnerships and collaborations, because this is such a big problem that we know to make a difference will require that collective impact. And so these partnerships and collaborations are going to be key to that.
Well, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about some other aspects of this, particularly whether there's any state or other government funding that you get. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, we're talking about Voce and why does it matter. And first of all, let me go to you, Maryann, to talk a little bit about a program called HEAL. That's HEAL, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, thank you so much. So HEAL PA is a coalition that's been supported out of our Office of Advocacy and Reform. In our first year, we gathered a think tank of trauma experts, and we said, you know, how would you develop a plan for Pennsylvania to become more healing center, to address some of these social maladies that we're seeing, mental illness, suicide, substance use, even those physiological responses to chronic stress like cancer and diabetes. And they produced what's called the Trauma-Informed Pennsylvania Plan. And it's a roadmap for how we can become a more healing place to live and to visit. And once that was developed, we said, well, now we've got to implement it. This is the hard part. How are we going to implement it? And we developed a coalition, a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary coalition that brings people who work at grassroots organizations with people who work in state leadership positions to talk about some of the struggles that our various systems are facing, whether it's physical, behavioral health, criminal justice, education. What are the inefficiencies in our systems that are exacerbating chronic stress and trauma?
One related question, do county governments get involved, or municipal governments as well get involved?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Yes, we have both subject matter expert teams that people sit on, and we do have people from both county and state government on those teams. But we also have community-led coalitions that we support. In total, I believe we have 26 community coalitions right now throughout Pennsylvania.
And the local governments are directly involved in that?
Yeah, local governments, but again, they follow this design of being inclusive of various voices. So they're coalitions who have law enforcement personnel on them. They're educational administrators on them.
Yeah, I would think local governments would be essential in terms of the cooperation, given the fact that they relate to people directly in many ways that state government doesn't. I'm not saying state government doesn't do it at all, but local government, you know.
Yeah, state government and local government, but it takes more than that, right? It takes others, like this grassroots effort that Maryann has talked about, and Voce being a part of that. It takes everybody on the playing field, doing what they can to understand trauma and creating those supports and services for the children. So it takes all of us. It takes that collective effort.
You're right about that. Well, let's talk a little bit about funding. Where do you get your money, the resources?
We are a traditional nonprofit, so it's through fundraising efforts, it's through grant making, through grant writing, and so forth. So Giving Tuesday is coming up, so we're hoping to, build some revenue.
Do you physically have office? Where is it located?
Our physical office is actually located in this building on the other side.
I mean, we're
so,
it's JPL where we tape.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
What an answer.
See, there you go. We're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
Yeah.
And you have offices throughout the Commonwealth, or is it all done, remotely?
Yeah, we have close to 400 employees that work across the state, working in government offices, again, working to achieve adoption and permanency for youth that are experiencing foster care.
Yeah. And you have staff throughout the state?
Yeah, so we have staff who sit throughout the state. We have a central office, though, as well in Harrisburg.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I think we tend to forget how large Pennsylvania is demographically as well as geographically, and reaching different regions of the state is not easy for a whole array of programs, whether we're talking about government programs or nonprofits who are trying to deliver essential services to the folks in our state. I almost said voters, where my world is. Residents of the state, right?
Right.
Yeah. And trauma affects all those people across the state, whether you're in an urban environment or rural or age groups. It doesn't discriminate, trauma, and so that's
now,
one
when we
reason.
talk about trauma, what are the root causes of it?
Oh, God, Maryann.
Yeah, so I was actually wanting to interject anyway, so I'm glad you asked, because I think that when we say trauma, people either think physical trauma, which is traumatic, or they think abuse, neglect, and these are all, yes, egregious forms of trauma, but we also recognize within HEAL PA and within our office that adverse childhood experiences go beyond singular traumatic events. Trauma at its core, when you look at it neurobiologically, it's chronic stress. It's overactivation of our stress response system, and that's why those physical ailments come later in life. So we really work very hard to broaden the definition of adverse childhood experiences to recognize that experiencing bullying is traumatic for children. Being on the receiving end of racial discrimination, really recognizing that living in poverty and not knowing when your next meal is going to come, these are prolonged traumas that have an impact on that individual's health into adulthood.
It's really complex. It's really complex where this trauma comes, and it takes not just a variety of forms, but how it affects people differently, young people. Now, what ages are we talking about? That when we talk about, you know, the need for assistance?
All ages.
All ages,
all ages,
not just
and into
children.
And into adulthood. Yeah, especially as we said, those adverse childhood experiences go into your adulthood and appear in different ways. So,
Now, when you generally deal with clients, patients, I'll call them, but however you want to define them, are you dealing more with children than with adults?
We are, yes. We certainly are at Voce. We're looking to, again, in our specialty of adoption and permanency, those are youth that are looking for those forever homes.
Yeah. And is there, you mentioned, I want to make sure, is there differences demographically and racially? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, there's definitely a disproportionality when we look at those that are represented in foster care. Sure.
Now, we had Angela Vigna on, who's a education support professional, and you wanted to make a comment about the work that she does.
Yeah, you had asked her, you know, what do you do? What do you do every day? And she spoke with so much pride about supporting children with their academics, and I love hearing that. I was actually a teacher when I first started my career. But I have to argue that what Angela probably does, and what's probably written in her in the application to appoint her to this honor today, is her ability to create positive, loving relationships with her students. That is how we help our students heal. And many of the students that she works with, she doesn't need to know that they've experienced trauma in their homes, right? She doesn't need to know the specifics. But her being there and forming that relationship, being a positive component of their lives is very healing. So I hope that she recognizes just how important that is.
Now, in your daily work, you use support professionals as well? I mean, in terms of the people you deal with?
Well, sure. Yeah, I think most of our staff are support professionals that are looking to, you know, support the families and children that are in need. So in different capacities, maybe not in the education world, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is one wonderful discussion. I think what is important about this is the degree to which you affect people in this state, and that is extremely critical. And I certainly want to thank you for coming on, and if you have any updates from time to time, please come back and let us know. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well. What'd you ladies think?